Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 国际辩论社 Let's Talk 观点好谈. Today, we have the great honor of hosting two distinguished guests who plays a crucial role in promoting and also strengthening the U.S.-Taiwan relations. Now, joining us are the Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart and also Congressman Mimbera, who both are the co-chair of the Congressional Taiwan Caucus, who is the largest bipartisan caucus in the U.S. House of Representatives. Well, we know that the Congressional Taiwan Caucus has been the forefront in advocating for Taiwan-related issues in the Congress. And we know that by emphasizing this, they also have been encompassing the diplomatic and also economic as well as the security dynamics. So today, we have the opportunity to delve into their recent visit in Taiwan and also their activities in the caucus. So first of all, I'd like to welcome both of you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. What a pleasure.
Glad to be here.
First of all, I'd like to ask our Congressman Vera about what's your primary visit in this trip to Taiwan?
You know, I think in a bipartisan way, the United States Congress has always been the leader in support of the United States and Taiwan relations. And we just saw a historic election just a little over a week ago where a show of democracy here on the island of Taiwan electing the next president. And we thought it was important for us as the co-chairs of the Taiwan caucus, but also as a Democrat and a Republican, to come congratulate the president-elect, Dr. Lai, as well as also have a chance to meet with the current president, President Tai.
That's fabulous. So like we just talked about, it's bipartisan support from this Congressional Taiwan Caucus. Can you tell our audience, what's the main purpose of this caucus?
Well, it's interesting what my colleague just said. The relationship between the United States and Taiwan has been a very strong one for years, but it's really cemented by the Congress of the United States. And that support for Taiwan continues. And it continues not only extremely strongly, but also in a bipartisan way, which is why we wanted to make sure that everybody understands that while we have differences and while we have huge debates in Congress of the United States, the support for Taiwan, for Taiwan's democracy, for the freedom and the prosperity of the Taiwanese people, that transcends our differences, that transcends any partisan divides. It is firmly rooted in the United States Congress, and that's still there. It is still there. And so we've had a number of really interesting meetings. And this is a busy time in Congress right now. We're doing the budget, the appropriations process. But as my colleague said, the election just took place here in Taiwan, and we felt it was important to let the world and the Taiwanese people know that while we might have differences in the United States Congress, the support for Taiwan and the admiration, right, for the Taiwanese people is as solid as ever before.
And I would just add, this is 2024. It's the 45th anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act, which was a historic piece of legislation that the United States Congress passed with the foundational principle that the future of Taiwan is up to the people of Taiwan. And I think by our coming in, I think you'll see additional congressional delegations and high-level visits. It's to reiterate that foundational principle, that Taiwan's future is up to the people of Taiwan.
Correct.
Definitely. We can see that action speaks really louder than words, and both of you have been so much in putting this action. And we know that the Congressional Taiwan Caucus has been passing a lot of bills related, to Taiwan's relations as well. So what are those really substantive assistance that this caucus has been providing to Taiwan?
Well, you want to talk about some of the economic issues first. For example, we hope we'll have good news, some additional good news, and some legislation that will be very beneficial not only for Taiwan but also for the United States, like the double taxation thing.
Absolutely.
Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. I mean, if you've watched in recent weeks, the committees on the House of Representatives have really advanced addressing the double taxation issue, which, if we're able to resolve this, will really spur an investment in the United States from Taiwan, but also will be good for Taiwan's economy. I can't predict the future. This is the United States Congress, but my expectation is in a bipartisan way. You saw a strong vote out of the committee, Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate. Hopefully this is something we can get done fairly quickly. In addition, we in the Taiwan Caucus have been pushing for increased trade, reducing barriers to trade, and increased economic cooperation. Again, because we think it's important. Taiwan's the world's leader in semiconductors, super important to the most advanced electronics in the world, and we've got to make sure Taiwan continues to do that, but that we have great supply chains to make sure we can keep doing that.
There's also, for example, the House passed, and it's now in negotiations, but for the first time ever, we have money, for example, for FMF, foreign military financing for Taiwan. And it just really kind of shows you the level of trust that the United States Congress has for Taiwan and the level of support. And by the way, we also have seen these constantly and frankly more frequent and more aggressive posture from the Communist Party of China, something that should worry us all. It does clearly worry the United States Congress. But once again, Taiwan continues to move forward. And if I may kind of steal one of your lines, which I've done quite a few times today, right, is you keep hearing about any changes of the status quo. And the reality is that the United States has not changed its posture. Taiwan has not changed its posture. The Communist Party of China has changed its posture in a more aggressive way, in a much more negative way. And so I think it's important to point that out, that there is one entity here who's being aggressive, who's being, I would rather say, even dangerous. And that's mainland China. That's not Taiwan, and that's not the United States.
As you just pointed out, that no one's changing the status quo, not the United States, not Taiwan, but possibly China. So we'd like to talk about, post-elections, of Taiwanese election, we see more like military provocations from China. So what's your take on this?
My sense is, going back to this, the status quo has been peaceful and prosperous for all the countries in the region, Taiwan, but for one country more than any other, that's been China. So there's no reason for China to change that status quo. We want China to be a responsible player. But of course, we're seeing increased military actions, provocations. We see it in the South China Sea. That forces the United States to step up along with other allied, like-valued nations, but also to work with Taiwan. The goal here is deterrence, to maintain the status quo of peace and prosperity. But given aggressive actions by Beijing, I think we were forced to have to respond and work with our partners.
And what we said at the beginning, what was said at the beginning of this interview, the goal here is, look, it's up to the Taiwanese people to determine who leads them and what avenues they pursue and which way they go. And that's the issue. Nobody here is trying to, change, dissuade, pressure. The United States clearly isn't trying to pressure. It's up to Taiwanese to decide their future. And they've done so, once again, in a transparent election. And it's something that we should all celebrate. And it's really interesting that what you saw after those elections, so many countries congratulated Taiwan in that election. And I think that's something that the Communist Party of China fears. They fear Taiwan. They see it as a threat because it is such an example and a contrast to the repression and the oppression within China or Hong Kong, right? And so, but again, that's why look, we're happy to be here. We're thrilled to be here with the message of just solidarity, of support, and of admiration for, again, another clean, transparent election.
Well, Taiwan truly appreciate the solidarity that the United States has been providing to Taiwanese people, but also at the same time, we've been facing solid diplomatic oppressions and also the economic pressures from China. So what do you think about how Taiwanese people how to deal with this pressure that we're facing?
I think that's why it's important to continue to work together on the economic side to make sure Taiwan continues to have such a strong economy, to address those economic issues. You heard presidential candidates talk about that. That's where if we can reduce trade barriers, if we can address the double taxation issue, I think those are all good things for Taiwan. They're certainly good things for the United States as well. But then I think it's important to say to the people of Taiwan, regardless of what you may hear messaging-wise out of Beijing, the people of the United States stand with you and stand firmly that the future of Taiwan is up to the people of Taiwan. And you'll hear me say that over and over again. That is a foundational principle that we all believe.
We also know that, China has been consistently criticizing of U.S. representative congressional members visiting to Taiwan. So how do you both perceive China's discontent on the actions?
They do this. That's who they are. It's the nature of the beast that it is, which they try to bully and to pressure and to threaten. And the reality is, and they do that, even to members. They try to do that even to members of Congress. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. I do think, however, by the way, that it's important to however, have a very strong deterrence, and that means strength. And so it is important that Taiwan, and you're seeing it stepping up in its own defense, because the best way to avoid conflict and to avoid war, when you're dealing with a thug, a bully, is to be strong. And so we're very pleased that we see that Taiwan is also stepping up there. The Taiwanese people are stepping up to make sure that their defense, in order to avoid war, is as strong as possible.
Well, about the defense, I'd like to talk about what we just mentioned about the status quo. If China continues to change the status quo, will the U.S. be also changing the status quo as well?
Well, again, from our end, I think because of China's aggressive behavior, it is forcing the United States and others to take actions, to have to patrol the South China Sea to make sure these are open, navigated waterways for maritime security, for freedom of navigation. The straits are international waterways, so important to the free movement of goods and services. I think that's very important. Again, I think the message here is China's posture and behavior isn't what a great nation does in the 21st century. It's not helpful to the prosperity of the people of this region or the people of the world, for that matter. You look at the aggression in the South China Sea. The Philippines has their own exclusive economic zone. Vietnam has their own exclusive economic zone. Everyone should be able to do what they want to do within their own territories and their maritime territories. China's changing that status quo, which is forcing everyone, not just the United States, but you see Europe, you see Australia, you see Japan and others. And the goal here isn't confrontation. The goal here is we had a context of stability that was prosperous for every nation, including China. Why would we change that? Why wouldn't we in the 21st century want to live in a peaceful, prosperous world for everyone?
And now back to Taiwan's current situation. We know that the ruling party once again won the most recent election, but also the majority of parliament, they lost that. So what's your advice on the ruling party, especially now it's a cross-party collaboration in the future?
Yeah. Well, I don't think we it's not up to us to kind of suggest what they should do. I will tell you, however, what I think is crucial, and you see that in our case. And so while right now in the United States we have a divided government, right? We have the House controlled by one party, and then the Senate and the White House controlled by a different party, and so that is always challenging. But what you also see is when it comes to, for example, as I mentioned before, the relationship with Taiwan. There is no divide between Republicans and Democrats, and so I think it would be helpful that while the politics, the interior politics within Taiwan, which in democracies, right, they're heated and they're sometimes messy, but not to lose sight of the fundamental. And part of those fundamentals is the relationship between Taiwan and the United States. And fortunately, in the United States Congress, we have all been able to make sure that that is not partisan, that remains bipartisan. And I would, without being presumptuous, I think that relationship between Taiwan and the United States has been so important. And so I would hope that regardless of any differences in, political differences within Taiwan, that there is that recognition that has served Taiwan well, it has served the United States, but actually it has served the entire world well to have that very special relationship.
Look, and I would say, the media, I'll only comment on U.S. media, but perhaps it's true in Taiwanese media as well, sometimes focuses on the political differences. But truly, at the end of the day, you see Mario, a Republican, myself, a Democrat. Yeah. We're close friends, and that is how it is in the majority of Congress. When we have to do something and we have to step up, there's not a hesitation. We've seen that with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Strong bipartisan, stepping up to come to the defense of Ukraine. Nobody was looking for another war in the Middle East, but there was no hesitation in terms of sending assets and troops to make sure this was contained and didn't spread throughout the region. And the same thing, when you look at the supplemental bill that President Biden has sent to us, it has both funding for Ukraine, funding for the Middle East, but more importantly, it has funding for the Indo-Pacific. That's right. And the goal there is to make sure we don't have a third conflict. Again, this is to avoid war, not to provoke war.
Correct. And that's the key. That is the key. The issue, nobody wants conflict. Nobody wants war. Taiwan clearly doesn't want it. The United States doesn't want it. But the best way to make sure that we don't have it is to make sure that everybody is strong. And that there's no misunderstanding that there is weakness. Because thugs tend to take advantage of weakness.
And I would add, obviously, we're living in the United States in divided government, as you will be living here in Taiwan. We're making a point to visit with all of the parties while we're here, because I think it's important. As Congress and the legislators in Taiwan, we have to have that working relationship, because, again, that partnership, that long-term strategic planning, the resources, I think that dialogue is very important.
Yeah.
Indeed, I think the spirit of collaboration between the parties is something that Taiwanese politicians should be looking up to as well. And also, like you just mentioned about the war, I'd like to talk more about how when the United States actually facing some obstacles in supporting Ukraine and also Israel in their wars. So in the future, will there be any similar difficulties in supporting Taiwan military-wise?
I mean, my sense is the supplemental funding that has Ukraine, that has funding for the Middle East, that also has funding for the Indo-Pacific and Taiwan. I believe firmly that we will get that piece of legislation done. It is in the process of negotiation. Certainly we have some domestic challenges on our southern border that we have to resolve and come together. But truly, if you take the politics out of it, we've seen votes on the floor for that funding in a similar way. And it's over 350 votes, Democrats and Republicans. The majority of both our parties are very supportive.
And I think that's an interesting observation that he makes. There are a lot, like you see it in politics everywhere, there are a lot of different issues that come to play, right? But the issue of supporting Taiwan, that's not been a problem.
Right.
That has not been a problem. Actually, to his point, the issue the problem has frankly been some domestic issues. Yeah. Not dealing with not international issues. Look, I think the United States and the people of the United States understand that the United States has an obligation to lead. But here's the point, and we've said it time and time again. It's not to impose. It's to try to make sure that Taiwan continues to be free, and it's up to the Taiwanese people to determine its future. Not somebody not a dictatorship that tries to impose its will. That happens to be close by Taiwan. And so, I don't, if we have issues with the funding, which we could have, because it's the democratic process, it's not because of the money for the Indo-Pacific. Maybe some other outside issues. I still think we're gonna be able to resolve those anyways.
I think we will as well.
Yeah.
Well, my next question goes about the United States' relationship with Europe. Of course, it's very crucial allies together, but also we can observe that now in Europe it's getting more conservative, it's more protectionism on the rise. So how do the United States make sure to be in this leadership position now going on?
Yeah, look, again, everybody has the right to elect their own people. And in Europe, you have long-standing democracies. And I think you have, again, some internal issues that cause populations to decide how they want to vote. I think one of the issues that the American people are telling us is when it comes to, for example, our relationship with Europe, is we cherish that relationship, but Europe has to step up also in its defense. And for so many years, obviously, I think Europe has gotten a little bit complacent, right? Kind of knowing that the United States was going to step up and defend Europe, which it has done time and time again. The American people are now saying, hey, carry your own weight, which is why I am so gratified to see what has happened here in Taiwan, and those are tough decisions to make, obviously politically, but the Taiwanese people are standing up. They're strengthening their defenses, their own domestic defense against any foreign adversary. The issues that were here the week when it's going from 4 months to 12 months for the military service. Those are tough decisions. But again, it's important that we all do our part. The United States, many in Europe in particular, have kind of been, fat and happy, hoping that the United States would always step in and protect them. And you're seeing that the United States is stepping up in the war efforts, for example, for Ukraine, but Europe has to do more, and it's starting to do more. And so, he mentioned, by the way, that you're seeing, because of the aggressiveness of communist China, how in the region you're seeing countries like the Philippines and Japan, kind of standing up and saying we have to do more, we have to do better. I think that's good for everybody. As far as the protectionism, look, every country has the right to think about their national security interests and their economic interests first. But I think Taiwan serves a very special place in the global economy. It's a beacon of hope and of democracy. And so I am not concerned as long as we all continue to do our part.
And I would just say the relationship with Europe is strong as ever.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, many of our closest allies are in Europe, our Five Eyes partners and others. Vladimir Putin made a horrible mistake here. His unprovoked invasion of Ukraine has united Europe. It strengthened NATO. The responsibility for European security, you're seeing the Europeans spend resources that I never would have expected them to spend in the defense of Europe, in the defense of Ukraine. Obviously, there's always politics that everyone has to work through, but that's nothing new. And so I think that context is incredibly important. And as Mario pointed out, I think Beijing, Xi Jinping's aggressive maneuvers here in Asia, in this region, has also woken up a Japan, a Korea, countries of the Southeast Asia that are not looking for conflict. Just as Taiwan's not looking for conflict, just as the United States is not looking for conflict. But we do want a foundation of peace and prosperity, of freedom, where we can compete with one another, where we can compete with China. But we want to do it on fair terms, on terms where it's our own future, it's our own decisions, not someone imposing their decisions on another person.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, it doesn't surprise us. What they do, they try to pressure, as I mentioned before, they try to even, they'll send nasty emails to members of Congress.
Have you received?
Oh yeah, we get them all the time, and it's kind of laughable.
How nasty?
Well, look, they don't work, because here we are, right? Right? Here we are, visiting. Yeah. I don't even know if they understand how absurd it sounds when they try to threaten, and I guess that's what they're used to doing to their own people, unfortunately. But it clearly doesn't work, for democracies around the world.
Look, to Chinese elected leaders and others, let's have dialogue. Let's talk about this. Let's do it in a respectful manner and so forth. I don't presume that I can dictate where Xi Jinping or other Chinese elected officials travel. I don't think they can tell us where we can travel, and
sure
certainly, So let's have a level of respect and dialogue for one another.
And also, of course, that the United States is the symbol of a democratic country, but there are occasional circumstances when the isolationism is on the rise. For example, we can see that Trump's recent proposal to impose tariffs on Taiwanese products. And also we see that Biden has also mentioned enhancing the competitiveness of the American products. So what's your interpretation of this trend happening in the United States?
I think it's just everyone focuses in on their own economies, their own jobs, making sure their individuals have employment. I'm sure the Taiwanese government looks at Taiwanese industry and employment just as the Chinese government does. That's where we have to sit down and negotiate.
Correct.
And how we take down barriers to competition, but on a fair playing field. And I think that's some of the concerns that I think President Trump raised, and I certainly think you see in the Biden administration. It's got to be a fair playing field. It's got to be fair competition.
Absolutely. And
then I'm very confident in U.S. products, as I'm sure that Taiwanese companies are very confident in the products that they're producing, that on a fair competitive playing field, we're going to do fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, free societies produce wealth. They produce opportunity. Freedom is just the most precious gift that humans can have, and I think totalitarian regimes like the Communist China, they fear the contrast of having Taiwan, so close. It's hard for them to be able to say that you have to have repression in order to do okay, and then you look just across the straits and you have this beacon of hope and of progress that is Taiwan. Yeah, look, freedom is always the right solution. It's always the right answer. And part of that, by the way, is the freedom of press, right? And we like to complain. All elected officials will complain about, the reporters, whatever. But without an aggressive free press, you can't have freedom. And that is another thing that is lacking in Communist China. And again, it's great to see in Taiwan.